Hey, 6th grade, how's it going? Happy Thursday. Today in conversation, what we're going to be doing is comparing stories. Now, stories are one of those things that people just adore, It doesn't matter if you're from Costa Rica or the United States like I am, or any other culture, even in the Egyptian culture, they told stories. So, what I'd like you to do is go to page 41, and we're going to listen to a story on page 41 that maybe might be a little bit familiar to you. So, let's see. On page 41, it says, look at the pictures. What do you think the story is about? So we just take a look at those pictures even before we start the story. I'd like to see, what do you think it's going to be about? Well, I see this girl with a man in the first picture over on the left. I think there's a hippo in the back, a hippopotamus with some birds. Not quite sure what he's holding, but it does look like it's an Egyptian spot because I do see what seems to be a pyramid in the background, right? What about that other picture that we see on the side? This picture is, let me try to get it over there. I see the picture on the side is more of like, trying to get that smaller, 1 second. There we go. This is a picture of the pharaoh, and it looks like that same bird, or a similar bird in the first picture, is flying through the air. Not sure if that's a falcon or what, and it looks like there's that same item over there on the left. It's also on the right. Maybe the bird had brought him something, I'm not really sure, but it looks very scared. So from those pictures, I wonder what you could do to predict what would happen in this story. Well, number 2 says, read and listen to the story and check your answers. Let's go ahead and just listen to the story to see if we can understand what's going on.
Student's Book, page 41. 2. Read and listen to the story to check your answers.
The ancient Egyptians told many stories. Here is one. Do you recognize the story? Rhodopis was a servant in the house of an old man. She was Greek, and she looked different from all the other girls in the house. So they laughed at her and called her bad names. However, the old man liked Rhodopis, so the other girls in the house were jealous of Rhodopis and were mean to her. They made her work hard and shouted at her. Rhodopis was very sad about that, but she never said a bad word.
So we're going to stop it right there. So far we've met a couple of main characters. The old man and Rhodopis. Now, Rhodopis is a servant. Okay, she works for the old man inside of his house. But then we also meet these other women that are inside of the story. Okay, they don't show any pictures, but we do know that these girls were jealous of Rhodopis. That's going to come into play a little bit later in the story. Let's continue listening.
The old man didn't know how mean the other girls were to Rhodopis. Her only friends were the birds and an old hippo, and she told them about the other girls when no one was listening. One day, the old man walked past when Rhodopis was dancing close to the river. He thought that such a good dancer should have shoes, so he bought her a beautiful pair of golden shoes. Now the other girls were even more jealous. A few days later, a messenger arrived and told them that the pharaoh was having a party and that everyone was invited. Rhodopis really wanted to go, but the other girls told her to get on with her work. While she was washing her clothes, the hippo jumped into the river and splashed water over her new shoes. She took them off to dry in the sun, but a large bird flew off with one of them. In Memphis, the pharaoh was sitting on his throne watching the party. Suddenly, a bird flew down and dropped a shoe on him. The pharaoh knew that the bird was Horus, the god of the sky, and that the shoe was a sign. He sent for the captain of his royal boat and started searching the country for the owner of the shoe. When the royal boat arrived at the old man's house, the pharaoh showed everybody the shoe. The girls saw it and knew that it belonged to Rhodopis, but they said nothing. The pharaoh was leaving the house when suddenly he saw Rhodopis. He invited her to try on the shoe. The shoe fit, and he asked her to be his wife. "But she's just a servant," the other girls said. The pharaoh looked at them. "To me, she is the most beautiful woman in Egypt, and she is going to be my queen."
All right, so that's kind of an interesting story. Now, in the beginning, we were asked if this story from the ancient Egyptian time also was similar to a story that you might recognize. Now, a lot of students pinpointed it right away, and they realized that this was very similar to a story that we all know called Cinderella. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just read portions of Cinderella to you right now. This is from the Disney era. There's lots of different versions of Cinderella, but for example, this one starts once upon a time. In our other story, this one started one day. Okay, so you can see the differences between the two stories. You'll see that Cinderella starts out in her step family and she spends her days cooking, scrubbing, washing, and doing other chores inside of her house, right? And that's how she basically spends her time. She's a servant. It's the same exact thing as the Egyptian story. And one day, she gets offered the opportunity to talk to some animals, which is exactly like the other story that we just talked to, right? Or we talked about, right? She talked to the hippo, she talked to the birds. All right, there's lots of different similarities between this story and the other one. Okay, here I think we're talking to a mouse. Jack, her favorite mouse, was upset. "What's all the fuss about?" Cinderella asked. Jack led her to a new mouse that was caught in a trap. So similar, right? Talking to the animals. And then later on in the story, we actually meet some other girls. Okay, let's read this dialogue. It says, "Cinderella spent the rest of her day attending to chores." "Take that ironing," Drizella demanded. "Don't forget the mending," Anastasia added. "Pick up the laundry and get on with your duties," her stepmother ordered. Now that sounds very similar to what we talked about inside of the other story, right? She had to do washing, she had to make sure that she was doing the work of the other girls, so it's very similar, right? Okay, we continue the Cinderella story, and then all of a sudden we meet a very important person. Okay, this person is the king and the prince. Now we all know what happens later on. There's a ball, royal ball, they get invited, but Cinderella unfortunately can't go. She needs something to wear, so she calls on someone very important, who is her. Oh, in a second, her fairy godmother. Okay, her fairy godmother appears out of nowhere, obviously is able to give her what she wants, grants her some wishes, like some transportation, as well as a very pretty dress. She's able to go to the ball, and I can't really tell you what else happens, but it's very similar to other story, right? Uh, she went and she danced with the pharaoh, and then the pharaoh ended up finding out her golden shoe, right? So it's similar to the other story, Cinderella, with the golden slipper. Okay, there's lots of different similarities between these two stories. Okay, what I'm going to do is try to see if I can find a screenshot of the discussion that I had with one of the 6th grade classes. Okay, I think it's important that we talk about that. Let me see if I can just find this. View details. Here we go. So from today's class, boys and girls, we were just comparing and contrasting different stories, right? So the discussion that we had in class was all about those two different stories, right? So I'm going to show you a screenshot from today's class, kind of discussing the similarities and the differences between the Egyptian story and the story with Cinderella. As soon as the image loads. Give me 1 second. It's still loading. Thank you for your patience. Okay, I'm not sure if it's going to load, but here's the picture will appear on the screen. While we're waiting, boys and girls, I want to encourage you to try to fill out those questions on the bottom. Okay, there's some questions about the parts of the story that you remember happening. Okay, and you're supposed to put them in order. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, so look back on this story to see if you can put those events in order. Okay, let's see if we can look. I can't seem to find that picture. I'm not sure why it's not appearing, but maybe I'll try it again. Anyway, we did a comparison contrast to see if we could compare the two stories, but we basically talked about all that already. Not sure why it's not appearing. Give it a second. Opening up. While we're waiting, let's actually put some of these events in order. So what was the first thing that happened? Go ahead and read those events and see which one appeared first. All right. I think letter B is probably the first one that happened. The other girls were always mean to Rhodopis. What's the second event? You're right. The old man gives Rhodopis a present, those golden shoes. So it should be letter A. What's number 3? Good. Rhodopis hears about the Pharaoh's party. And the next one? Good. The Pharaoh meets Rhodopis for the first time. And the last event. The bird drops the shoe. And that's when the Pharaoh goes back to Rhodopis and marries her. And everyone lives happily ever after. Okay? I can't find the image. I'm sure it's probably there somewhere, but that's okay. It's fine. We'll do without it. Boys and girls, what I'd like you to do is I'd encourage you to try to see if you can make up your own story. We're going to be talking about stories over the next class, and try to see if you can make up your own story so you can share that for next time. So thank you very much for attending class, and have a great week.